people on clinical need, and that can mean when times are very, very busy that patients with less urgent clinical needs will wait longer, and that's very unfortunate. Generally people are very understanding, but we do sometimes have situations where people do get unhappy, and we do have some people who indeed leave before they're treated, but that is a very small number.
That's the frontline experience. One step back, Mr. Mears, to the numbers that I began with and that Rebecca just reported on. This 95% target, is that realistic?
Well, I'm pleased to say that we've done very well recently against that performance target. We achieved 94% in December, and actually our own figures show we achieved over 95% in January. So for us it's really important because we want to make sure that people are treated as quickly as possible, and it's a very good metric for us to make sure that we're doing everything we can do to get people seen and treated quickly. However, there are going to be patients that sometimes clinically do need to wait longer than 4 hours, who are needing specialist treatment in our A&E department before they can be moved. So there is always a tolerance needed, but I think that the number in the target for A&E is a target on how your whole system is performing, as well as just your hospital A&E department.
Do you want the government to get off your back, or do you want them to give you more money?
Well, I think targets are sometimes helpful to focus the mind. They can sometimes also become a priority at the exclusion of everything else. I think the challenge is to make sure you balance those two things and keep patient care as the primary focus. I'm very clear with my teams here. Our focus is to do the right thing for the patients, and the targets need to be delivered, but they are not the priority. If there's a clinical need to treat a patient longer than 4 hours, that's what we will do. In terms of the money, it's about, I think, how we focus on our own financial challenges, which we have like every other hospital, but how we use the total pot of resource available to us in the local health economy with GPs, community services and social care. The whole system is under pressure, and at times like this, the most important thing is for everyone to work together and use our collective resources to the best use of our local communities and our patients.
Paul Mears, fascinating insight. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon.
Thank you.
Paul Mears, who's running Yeovil Hospital down there. Now, the government has been accused of turning its back on child refugees during furious exchanges in Parliament this morning. The backlash erupted after ministers announced that just 350 children will be brought to the UK under an agreement to let in lone children living in Calais. The Home Office had previously suggested it would accept 3,000. Here's political correspondent Carl Dinnan.
When MPs voted to allow unaccompanied migrant children stuck in Europe into this country, many thought that around 3,000 would be allowed in. But the government has announced it will now stop the scheme after just 350. And today, furious MPs called the Home Secretary to the Commons, demanding to know why.
Where does it say that instead of the 3,000 that Parliament debated, we will only help a tenth of that number? Where does it say that when we get the chance, we will somehow turn our backs once again? It doesn't, because we didn't say that.
How does she live with herself, leaving thousands of children subject to disease, people trafficking, squalor and hopelessness?
The Home Secretary said the scheme was not, in fact, closed, but that local authorities did not have the capacity to take more children. And she said the French authorities wanted the scheme, named after Lord Dubs, brought to an end.
They do not want us to indefinitely continue to accept children under the Dubs Amendment, because they specify, and I agree with them, that it acts as a draw, it acts as a pull, it encourages the people traffickers.
MPs expected the Dubs scheme would bring in around 3,000 unaccompanied children. So far, only 200 have arrived, with another 150 still to come. But this lunchtime, one London councillor told ITV News they still had space for more.
At the time of the closure of the Calais camps last October, the Lewisham Council offered 23 places for Dubs children. These are unaccompanied minors with no connection to the UK. Since that time, the government has not taken up one of those places for any Dubs child.
So the government has not heard the end of this from MPs and campaigners who believe capping the Dubs scheme at 350 is shameful.
So, Carl, anger there in the Commons over the refugee situation and, of course, the tricky business of getting Brexit through the other place, the House of Lords. What is Theresa May's strategy?
Well, it's quite interesting, you know, Alistair. Theresa May is just now meeting the Italian Prime Minister, one of the people she'll be negotiating Brexit with quite soon. But first of all, she has to get it through the House of Lords, as you say. Now, last night, a government source suggested the Lords could face calls for its abolition if it tried to hold up Article 50, the Brexit triggering bill. Today, the government distanced itself from that, only for a Conservative MP, Oliver Letwin, to pop up and suggest there should be a debate on the abolition of the Lords if they try to hold up Brexit. And that suggests there's a kind of good cop, bad cop going on here, because the truth is the government has very little control over what happens in the Lords because they don't have a majority there. So Mrs May does have to try and put on pressure where she can, but really will be waiting with her fingers crossed to see what Lords try to do. Speaking to senior Lords, they have said they will try and amend the bill, but they've said they won't hold it up beyond the end of March, when Mrs May wants to trigger Brexit.
Carl, thank you. Meanwhile, the Labour leaders dismissed a fresh wave of defiance over the Brexit bill and insisted he still has the backing of his MPs. Jeremy Corbyn now has to reshuffle his cabinet after yesterday's vote, after his shadow business secretary resigned. The changes could come as soon as this afternoon. Now, the partner of the author Helen Bailey, who's on trial for her murder, has been describing conversations with the men that he claims were behind her disappearance. Ian Stewart's accused of secretly drugging and killing his partner before disposing of her body in a cesspit. But he told a jury she was abducted and that he even spoke to her 4 days later. Well, Richard Pallow is live at St Albans Crown Court for us this afternoon. Talk us through this evidence, if you would, Richard.
Well, Ian Stewart's voice cracked repeatedly as he gave his version of events this morning. He described on numerous occasions how two mystery men called Nick and Joe visited him at his house and abducted Helen. He says that 4 days after her disappearance, she actually called him and said that, "I love you, but I need my phone back. Please give it to them." He says that he did. They went round his house and then he went round the Kent coast on some sort of tour to basically ensure that she kept alive. On another occasion, he says that the man called Nick approached him at a bar in Stansted Airport and said, "We want £500,000. Stewart replied, "I don't have that amount of money." And Nick said to him then, "I know you don't, but Helen does. If you say anything, you'll be visiting your sons, Jamie and Oliver, in hospital." Now, Helen Bailey's body was found in a cesspit under the garage of the house that she shared with Stewart. Stewart also says that Nick and Joe visited the house on one occasion, incapacitated him, and went into that garage. The prosecution alleged this is all a massive web of lies, and the prosecution opened by Stuart Trimmer QC, saying, "You are without doubt a complete liar." Stewart said no. He then went on to say, "You must have been boiling with rage after your arrest, and yet accused of murder, you still didn't say anything about Nick or Joe." Indeed, he didn't say anything about them till 5 months after his arrest and 8 months after her disappearance. Ian Stewart denies all the charges against him.
Richard, thank you. The parents of a British backpacker murdered in India in 2013 are travelling back to the place she died in a desperate attempt to speed up their fight to convict her killer. Sarah Groves was 24 when she was killed in an attack on a houseboat in Kashmir. A Dutch man is being held for the murder, but after years of delays in the Indian court system, Sarah's parents are still waiting for justice. Neil Connery reports.
Sarah Groves was 24 when she was stabbed more than 40 times as she slept on a houseboat in India in 2013. She was backpacking in Kashmir when she was murdered. A guest on the houseboat was arrested in connection with her killing. But the case against him has so far involved 87 court hearings stretched over nearly 4 years. Now Sarah's father, Vic, and mother, Kate, are heading to India ahead of the latest trial.
I think it's appalling. We're on soon we'll be on our third judge. We're actually on our second, but he's going to retire. We're on our third public prosecutor, although this one at least we do have a dialogue with. Richard DeWitt, the defendant, he's fired 3 sets of lawyers and is currently looking for his 4th.
Dutchman Richard DeWitt denies murdering Sarah Groves. Her parents were granted permission by the judge to meet him.
I don't know if he's the man who killed my daughter. When you talk to him, you're you're raising that question at the back of your mind all the time. Is this the guy who savagely, brutally stabbed my daughter 42 times? It does seem, when you start to talk to him, that is not something that he's capable of. But of course he does have a history of mental illness.
Sarah's parents have urged the Foreign Office to put pressure on the Indian authorities to speed things up, but they say they can't intervene in another country's legal system. Neil Connery, ITV News.
Still to come, who's the best sibling? Scientists step into the age-old debate between brothers and sisters. But first, the package holiday firm Thomas Cook's increasing its prices. The company says it's offering better quality hotels and experiences, but overall pricing is up 9%. I'm joined now by Sophie Griffiths of the Travel Trade Gazette. I mean, they say in their press notice that they want higher margins out of all this. I mean, they basically want more profit out of us.
I think that's a bit unfair. I think you can't deny that there's been huge demand for the Spain and the Spanish islands, and they're talking particularly as well in relation to the Spanish islands. You know, the capacity crunch that the Western Mediterranean has seen, and it saw last year, was incredible. You know, Tunisia has wiped off the map, Sharm el-Sheikh has wiped off the map. There's a huge slump in demand for Turkey. It stands to reason that when there are a lot of people demanding something, prices are going to rise slightly. Where it is saying that destinations are doing well is Greece, which is up 40% year on year, Bulgaria, Croatia, Portugal. If you're looking for slightly cheaper holidays, there are other destinations to look at.
But as far as Spain, which for a lot of folk listening to this conversation is still a #1 option for all sorts of reasons, can we assume that the other big branded tour companies are going to follow suit of Thomas Cook?
It will be interesting to see next week. So TUI, that's the owner of Thompson and First Choice, are releasing their Q1 results next week. So it will be interesting to see what they say. It could be that, yes, I mean, when there is greater demand, it stands to reason that probably prices are going to rise slightly.
Yeah. I mean, you write about and observe the whole industry, and obviously these big companies are at the very heart of it. But a lot of folk are tempted on television to go online, do their own thing, put it together. Isn't that a way of getting round some of these price hikes?
It is, but security and protection is key for people that are looking to go on holiday. And what I would say is that you might be able to do it yourself, but you risk not having the protection, not having the security, and not having the incredible advice that travel agents can give you. Certainly, we've seen a huge rise in the number of people going back to use travel agents because they've lost out before. You know, if a company goes bust, you want that security and protection, and that's what you get by using a travel agent.
Yeah. Or finally, and briefly, if not Spain, and you've been clear about Turkey, Tunisia and places like that, are there other as yet undiscovered spots folk could try?
Well, Cuba is doing incredibly well. Cuba. Thomas Cook released news of a new route that they're launching from Manchester today. So, yeah, Cuba's the one to watch at the moment.
As always, shop around. Sophie, great to see you. Thank you very much for coming in. Waitrose is planning to close 5 of its underperforming stores, putting almost 500 jobs at risk. A further 180 management roles are also likely to be lost over the next 3 years, but the supermarket chain says it is investing in new branches and new positions are being created. And the FA's failure to increase diversity is being debated in Parliament today. Football's governing body could lose public funding if it doesn't sufficiently reform its predominantly white, male-dominated council. 5 children have been taken to hospital after a school bus overturned and crashed down an embankment in North Lancashire. It happened during this morning's rush hour in Cumbernauld. Police say no one was seriously injured. Next, a new take on an age-old debate. Researchers at the University of Edinburgh have concluded that older siblings are more successful than younger ones because they get more attention. It seems that that is going to make good reading for some famous examples, as Suzanne Verdi explains.
Older, it seems, really does mean wiser, although not always faster. Take Princes William and Harry. William, as firstborn, will get the top job, being king one day, while younger brother Harry's more rebellious side is well known, obvious even as a child. And when it comes to excellence in sport, it's the older siblings that provide the steadying influence. After winning her 23rd Grand Slam in Australia last month, Serena Williams said she wouldn't be world #1 if it wasn't for her older sister Venus. And who could forget older brother Alistair Brownlee giving up his chance to win the World Triathlon Series in Mexico to help his younger brother Johnny over the finish line. Economists at the University of Edinburgh say firstborns tend to thrive academically because parents have more time to educate them.
When you have more than one, things are not so easy. So you have to kind of pick and choose which type of investments you want to do with each one. And then it's obviously seen as more important to make your children well developed and happy rather than make them smart.
Of course, it all means if you're a parent, you've now got something else to feel guilty about. And if you're a younger sibling, something else to blame your parents for. Suzanne Verdi, ITV News.
The supercar manufacturer McLaren's opening a new £50 million factory in Sheffield this lunchtime. The high-tech producer of Formula One cars is bringing back production of its carbon fibre chassis to the UK from Austria, despite the Brexit vote. Well, Chris Kiddie joins me live from Sheffield. Quite a boost, I would think, Chris.
It is a boost for this region and a boost for the country. As you say, production of the carbon fibre chassis which go into these supercars here will eventually come out of this plant, the Advanced Manufacturing Research Centre on the outskirts of Sheffield. It'll employ a couple of hundred people here, apprentices here. They're at the launch here today, as are local councillors and people from the local city region, all welcoming this development. As you say, production coming back here, onshoring, as they say. Other companies involved in this project in the past have included Boeing, Rolls-Royce and BAE Systems. So McLaren are just the latest in a long line of companies wanting to bring their production to this part of the world.
Chris, thank you. And finally, the extraordinary story of Daniel Miller from New South Wales, who got stuck in a very difficult situation. He quite literally, as you're about to see, there he is, found himself up to, well, almost his eyes after his digger rolled into a muddy bog. He was only rescued 5 hours later after a neighbour heard his cries for help.
And then I saw the blue Subaru come up the road. I was, oh. So I was euphoric by then. And I saw her walk around onto the dam wall, and poor thing, I felt so sorry for her. I felt more sorry for her than myself. The look on her face was just terror.
Well done. That is it for now. We're back at 6:30. Until then, a very good afternoon to you. Bye-bye.